Morning, all. All right, so these are now multiplying. I now have two of these rally towels, and according to Yvonne, there's at least 10 of them in the house. So we'll see how many rally towels I end up with by the end of the Calder Cup playoffs. I'm hoping for a lot of them because it's kind of fun. Anyways, there are four games today. I'm wearing my Seattle sweater. This is, of course, a Metropolitans. I got this from Abbotsford. If anybody's ever wondered where I get the sweaters from, they're pricey, but it is a high quality product. All right, and they didn't pay me for that. Four games today. Starting at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. Vegas in a very frosty Winnipeg. Looked it up before starting up this video. It's chilly there, and apparently that's even below normal by Winnipeg standards, taking home ice to a whole new level. So we go from Vegas, where things are relatively warm, to Winnipeg, where things relatively aren't. And we'll see if Winnipeg's home ice advantage shows up for them. This is a topic of conversation that I feel like I'm having with Winnipeg for a long time. They have the whiteout, and the fans get really excited about what Winnipeg might do and could do, and the fans all show up and they're all excited. And the record at home, it doesn't feel like reflects the fan excitement. So we'll see how things go today. It'll be interesting to see if the early start time favors one team or the other, who shows up early, who shows up late. Can Winnipeg do the full 60 minutes in Game 3 like they did in Game 1? It really feels like Game 3 is key in every series today. Because that's the thing, as each game in the series comes up, we know that it's more important than the last. That's why the hockey gets more entertaining and more interesting. So we'll see. Then at 7 Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, we've got the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, Hedman's at the morning skate for Tampa. Does not necessarily mean he's playing, just that he's at the morning skate. I'm going to say straight out, if there's any way for Victor Hedman to play, he will. That's just how Hedman is. One of the toughest players in the league, and there are a lot of those guys in Tampa. They're absolute warriors, and it is not going to be easy for Toronto to get 4 wins here. But, Toronto bounced back. They won Game 2. We'll see how they do on the road in Game 3, and whether or not Vasilevsky has one of those big games. That's the one thing I think is, after the last game where, Vasilevsky gets shelled for 7 goals against, he could very well come out today, and who knows, maybe the first shutout of the playoffs. I've not had to use the Tony the Tiger Magnet yet. So maybe we see a shutout today. Not necessarily from Tampa or from anybody in that series, but maybe we see one today. 8 Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, the New Jersey Devils in against the New York Rangers. I'm thinking, if I was taking bets, and I don't, and I won't, on who was going to get a shutout tonight, people would probably lean towards Shesterkin out of the 8 starting goaltenders. And also, the New York Rangers last year in the playoffs were quite good at home. They were 8-2 at home in the 2022 playoffs. So for New Jersey, they're up against it. They're against a veteran New York team who have gone through their share of growing pains to get to this point, but the Rangers really look like a contender. For New Jersey, they need to flip the script a bit. They need to really come out and nullify that MSG crowd for the first 10 minutes. They're going to probably need to ride out a wave. The Rangers are going to have a lot of energy out of the gate, and New Jersey's going to have to do their best to stifle it. It is not easy. It's not easy at all, and so I don't envy that task for them, but it'll be a fun one tonight, I think. Then at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, the Colorado Avalanche and the Seattle Kraken. Now, I'm wearing Seattle not because I think they're winning tonight, but because this is kind of a big deal. This is the last time there was a Stanley Cup playoff game in Seattle was March 29th of 1919. No, I wasn't born then. Thank you. But at any rate, yeah, Seattle playing at home is kind of a big deal. And I mean, it sounds bad to say, but I mean, if Colorado wins this series in 5, they win it in 5. Really, the point for Seattle is they've shown they're competitive. They've shown that they can play with one of the best teams in the league, or the best team in the league, right, in Colorado. And I think they've accomplished a lot this year. So if the one win in Game 1 is all they get, great. But if they win tonight, then the dreams of the upset will continue. If they lose tonight, but they win Game 4, the dreams of the upset will continue. So they really, if they get that split at home, if they win both games at home, of course, then we're in a whole other conversation, and then there probably have to be a video on it. But at any rate, let me know your winners in the comments section below, as always. So, one thing about the Arizona Coyotes that I always find interesting is that on the outside, people will say, well, nobody wants to play there. Now, Christian Fischer, he wants to stick around. He wants to sign a long-term deal. And a lot of guys do sign long-term deals in Arizona. And there's various reasons why they would. So Fischer wants to stick around long-term. I would think the interest would be mutual in that taking place. Usually when a guy says that, he's probably willing to take less than market value to stick around. And a long-term deal should get you a lower cap hit than you'd have otherwise. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so last night, of course, the Edmonton-LA game, and when I saw the finish of that, I thought, okay, that's all anybody's going to be talking about. So I wake up this morning, log on to the internet, and of course, log on. Hey, so how do you log on to the internet? THG doesn't know what he's talking about. Nobody's ever logged on to the internet. You just on your phone. All right, so that's my age showing. Anyways, so Elliot Friedman said last night that a general manager, and he wouldn't say which one, texted him to say that at the GM meetings, plays like last night's were discussed. And if there's a goal that's on the board, there has to be absolute, complete, definitive proof that a goal should be overturned. Now, the debate has been out there, and I'm going to say that I agree too that some of these plays that are being reviewed don't have any impact on the play on the ice. The other thing that I have found interesting is, so last night Jay Woodcroft said, hey, McDavid believed that it was touched with a high stick, and I believe him because he's the best player in the world. It is an odd argument to make because the best player in the world doesn't necessarily see things better than everybody else when it comes to that kind of thing. And that's just like, I'm not going to go, oh, well, if Jack Johnson saw it, I don't care who's Jack Johnson. Oh, Nathan MacKinnon saw it. Well, that's totally different then. For all we know, Jack Johnson could have much better vision than Nathan MacKinnon. And from where McDavid was, it may have looked to him like it hit the stick. And from certain camera angles, it definitely looks like it did. But you have to have that definitive proof. Because if the shoe was on the other foot and that goal counted, I have a feeling people complaining would be saying, well, there was no definitive angle, so I think it's the right thing. Or the other argument I've seen, which is it didn't affect the play anyways. So since it didn't affect the play anyways, that puck was coming right back down where it was anyways, right? And I understand too it being, well, that's not the rule. But again, I do sometimes get frustrated when I see something get reviewed and it's obvious that it didn't affect the play. And in last night's case, they looked at it for a long time. It was over 5 minutes. So they did their best due diligence on that. And basically this GM saying to Elliot Friedman via text, if you're going to take a puck or if you're going to take a goal off the boards, you better have proof that we should be taking a goal off the board. Now, my answer to that, my addition to that as well as I think isn't proof. So when people say, well, I think that it hit, well, clearly I think, then that's not absolute proof. And this is the thing come playoff time. I always get a kick out of it and following every single team on social media. Whenever something controversial happens, I'm always fascinated by how we see the play is colored by which team we cheer for. And that happens a lot of the time where, if there's a penalty called, one fan base is like, yep, that should have been a penalty. And the other fan base, are you kidding me? They called that. That's ridiculous. And it happens throughout the game. So that's why I don't complain about refereeing. That's why I don't. And I genuinely don't. Last night's Boston game, last night's Dallas game, I didn't complain about the officiating because I just don't see the point. If a team like for Edmonton last night, they just didn't get a goal 5-on-5. And looking through their scoring so far through 3 games, there are players that are not producing, that they need to start producing. You can't just rely on McDavid and Draisaitl and the top guys so much. So that's where we're at. But again, I think when I see people talking about the officiating, part of it too, I think is you don't have to admit that a team is losing a series if you can argue, well, no, we're not losing, it's being taken away from us. And that's something that's a bridge I've never crossed. Like I've never, in all the time I've watched hockey, rolled over and said, the referee stole it. Even going back to 1989, which is when I was mad about the Joel Otto goal counting in Game 7 in overtime, I didn't complain about the rest of the series. I did get a kick out of, how there was a perception that Bill McCurry didn't give Vancouver a decent break. But of course, ask Toronto fans about Kerry Fraser, and yeah. If they're in my age range or near that, they're probably going to have some opinions. This is something that's gone on for a long, long time, and it is kind of embedded in hockey fandom that you have to, you'll blame the officials, everything, but again, and I've mentioned this for years, you have the option to kill the penalty. I also saw a post today too with, well, the Kings are just keeping them off board 5-on-5 and they're excelling on the penalty kill. Edmonton's power play is clicking at 50%. I don't think LA is excelling at the penalty kill part. They're just neutralizing them 5-on-5. And Korpisalo has been really, really good. So there's my take on that. I know it may not be a popular take on it, but that's my take. From last night's games as well, Minnesota got Eriksson Ek, and then they didn't. He came back, he played 19 seconds, and then exited the game. So kudos to Minnesota for playing a forward short, especially a key forward like that they figured was in the lineup, but was back from injury, and they adapted. It's something Boston did as well, adapting to the loss of both of their top two centers in Krejci and Bergeron, which when I saw it, I was like, well, this is it. I guess Florida could go up 2-1 tonight. But it is about that next man up mentality. I've been very gung-ho on Minnesota through most of the season. I felt bad when they had that fall towards the end. They had some rough games towards the end of the schedule, and it caused them to end up finishing third rather than first or second. But they asserted themselves at home, and now if they win Game 4, yeah, that series should be theirs. The problem is in the next round, you likely end up with Colorado. If you end up with Seattle, that's a whole other ball game. But at this rate, I would like to see Minnesota. And it's funny, too, because I do want to see Minnesota succeed. Like, I understand the suffering of the state of Minnesota. But at the same time, I'm a Dallas fan, so there's some suffering for Dallas that's been there, too. But again, they went to the Stanley Cup final in 2020. The suffering in Dallas, to me, is nowhere near what it is in Minnesota. So I'm a little bit torn between my fandom and just the hockey mind part of me going, if Minnesota won that series, that'd be kind of nice for the state of Minnesota. Anyways, so for Abbotsford, as I mentioned at the start, they moved on last night. I did upload some shorts. Basically, Yvonne was filming it, sending it to me, and I was uploading them to the channel. I thought that was something fun. Obviously, we're not going to be using game footage because game footage is a whole other issue I don't want to get into. I just don't want to end up getting into that portion of things. But yeah, they won that game last night. You guys can let me know if you enjoyed those shorts or just forget it, whatever. But anyway, it was fun, especially since it's not National Hockey League hockey. It's American Hockey League hockey, so it's another league, and it's a way to incorporate that into the channel too. But yeah, so for Abbotsford, they play either Calgary or Colorado next. I also saw somebody asking last night, who would you rather see them play? I would much rather see Calgary because they really hate each other. Those teams absolutely detest one another. And I think it would make for some very entertaining hockey. I watched 2 games between the Wranglers and the Canucks last week. And yeah, it's just as good as the Flames and the Canucks in terms of just that rivalry and that really strong dislike for one another. So that's what I'm hoping to see happen in the next round. Got my fingers crossed on that one. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And again, coming back to the officials discussion, I'm not saying bad calls don't happen, but I do think that people dwell on bad calls here and there so much. And the other thing that I've always wondered is that for people that are convinced that, the National Hockey League just decides in the playoffs, well, we've decided this team's not allowed to have the win. I don't understand why people still support the league if they believe that's going on. It was something I struggled with when the NBA was here in Vancouver. That Vancouver wasn't a good team, but I could see that the officiating was also kind of working against them in certain games. And it made it tough. It made it tough for me to really invest in the NBA. It's part of the reason why I was a fan of basketball, and then the NBA was in Vancouver, and I've been less of a fan of basketball since. Shouldn't have happened that way, but it did. But yeah, so let me know your thoughts, because honestly, again, to me, if you don't trust the officiating, it does affect your ability to watch the sport, at least for me. And so I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.